Welcome to the Business Leadership Series, where we engage with leaders who are making an impact on their worlds and who want to share their knowledge and experience for your personal and professional growth. The following interview is designed to inspire you to become the best leader you can be. Your host, Derek Champagne, is the founder and CEO of The Artist Evolution, a full-service agency building successful brands, marketing tools, and campaigns, and also the author of the best-selling book, Don't Buy a Duck. And now, let's begin today's Leadership Series interview.
Welcome to the Business Leadership Series, where our goal is to inspire you to become the best leader that you can be. We've got a special treat today. We have a baseball legend, 1969 World Series champion with the New York Mets, Art Shamsky, with us today. Art, thank you for taking a few minutes out of your busy schedule to join us.
Derek, thank you so much. It's great to be with you.
Hey, most of us, if we've not lived under a rock, have heard, of course, of the 69 Mets. You're also the author of the new book, After the Miracle, The Lasting Brotherhood of the 69 Mets. On the cover, I'm holding it in my hand here. Great book. Impossible 50 years ago and still unforgettable half a century later. That's what Bob Costas said. You and I had a chance to meet a few weeks ago, our mutual friend MJ Padone, and you were just sharing a few highlights, and I had goosebumps. And I said, I need to talk to you. And the timing is amazing. It's the 50th year anniversary. And I would like to hear from you. Talk to me a little bit about what we talked about for a few minutes, a tumultuous time in our country, kind of paint the picture of what was happening in our nation. And that is a big moment for me. I wasn't there at the time. And I can only imagine, and you paint a vivid picture of that in both of your books.
Well, I think one of the reasons that team, the 69 Mets, resonates 50 years later is because of what was going on in the country and in the city of New York and the world at the time. The war in Vietnam was just tearing this country up. There was so many problems that sort of all sorts of protests and just unrest in the country, and we made people feel better about their lives for a brief period of time. It was an unbelievable year in terms of sports in New York City. The Jets won the Super Bowl in January. We won the World Series in October, and the Knicks in May of '70 won the NBA championships, and all for the first time. And that's what people remember, and particularly the Mets, because we came from nowhere. We were known as the lovable losers in the early years. Although I wasn't there, Derek, I can't take the blame for those early years.
That's
first
good.
year the Mets were in existence in 1962. The record was 40 wins and 120 losses. It's hard to imagine losing 120 games in a year if you try to lose those games. But we were known as the lovable losers. And when I got over there in '68, Gil Hodges came over too as our manager, and that really was the turning point. Although that year we finished ninth, a half game out of last place, and we still weren't a very good team. And in '69, the Major League went into division play, and we were in the Eastern Division of the National League, and nobody then even thought we would do anything. But it turned out all of a sudden it all came together in August of that year. But it's true that era, that period of time was so turbulent that, again, people remember and have passed on from generation to generation how we made them feel better about their lives. And I think that's what we wanted to do in the book. Eric Sherman co-wrote the book with me, and there's so many books been written about that 1969 team. It's probably over 50.
Wow. And
what we wanted to do was just write something a little bit different, and we decided to take a trip out to see Tom Seaver, who was our star of the team and obviously the face of the franchise. And we went out there, and still when we made that trip, we weren't sure about the direction of the book. But once we went out there and saw him and sat down and reminisced with the three other guys, the other teammates that we took out there, it was just a wonderful experience. And we said, let's do it this way. Let's write about the relationships and the camaraderie and the love we have for each other, even after 50 years. And the other part that's important to know is that we wrote about aging. You know, it's the reality of life. All of us have gotten older. We've lost 10 members of that team, and a couple are ill now. And so we wanted to go in that direction and make it a sentimental journey of these 50 years. And it's worked. The book made the New York Times bestseller list. And I wanted you to get a copy and read about it, because people who maybe you weren't even born, once they understand the beauty of that team and how it changed relationships. And in my case, and I guess everybody on that team, all our lives changed October 16th, 1969, when we won the World Series. It was just it's been a ride that it's hard to explain. And we had this reunion this past weekend, and it's been unbelievable. The Mets brought back all the players that could make it back, and it was just a wonderful experience for all of us to be together again and share those moments. And I can't tell you how many fans just come up to me and just say thank you. It's not like they want to get something signed; they want to just say thank you for what you did for us back in 1969. And what's really interesting about it, I meet people who weren't even born who know about that team. So I know that was a long-winded answer, but the reality of it is it's been special for me and being part of that team. And I played 13 years, and really nobody ever talks about the other 12. It's really about 1969.
Wow. Hey, thank you again. And thanks for indulging me with my questions, because I feel like I'm reading the book. I'm living it for the first time, because, again, I was born in 76. I want to, you mentioned October 16th, so I have a note here I want to ask you about, because you talk about it in the book. And I can only imagine, and I'm sure you've answered these questions many times, but while we're on memory lane, talk to me about just the absolute electricity in the air. It's October 16th. It's on everything, on TV, in the papers. It's nationwide. It's electric. What was that feeling like to wake up that day, that morning, and realize what you were about to do?
Yeah, it was incredible. We lost the first game of the series in Baltimore. And I have the notoriety of making the last out of the only game we lost in the World Series. But we won the next one. Our second best pitcher, Jerry Koosman, pitched a great game. And we came back to New York 1-1. And if we would have lost the second game and come back 0-2, we might have lost 4 in a row. It was a great Baltimore Oriole team that won 109 games that year.
Wow.
They had a great lineup and a terrific pitching staff. But we came back to New York 1-1. And when we won the third game, which was Tuesday the 14th, but ironically was my birthday, and we won that game and went up 2-1, I think there was a sense that we could really do something special. And then as we won game 4, Tom Seaver pitched a great game, and we won in the 10th inning and went up 3-1. I mean, there was a feeling in New York and I think around the country that, oh my gosh, this can't be happening. This team that was 100-1 to win a World Series could possibly beat this incredible team. And then on the 16th, I think with Jerry Koosman coming back to pitch the second time in this series, we were all really confident. And as fate would have it, he pitched a terrific game, complete game. And so we won on that day. It changed, like I said earlier, changed all our lives. And back then, it was all day games, too. So a lot of people saw it, even kids who were in school, their teachers let them come to show the games on television, and the world was caught up in this situation, and people remember how exciting it was, and it was just unbelievable. And then we had the ticker tape parade at Broadway a couple of days later, and it was just one of these times that you dream about in your life, that if you could ever be in this situation, and I was lucky enough to be part of that team. And I guess for all of us who were members of that team, no matter what we did in our careers, we'll always be known as being part of the 69 Mets, which is very, very special in a sense because of what, again, I go back to what we did for the city of New York and how we made people feel. And I don't deny the fact that we weren't the greatest team ever to win a World Series, but we had a great manager in Gil Hodges, and we had situation where he got everybody involved in the game. So when you talk about the team, it's not just about Tom Seaver or Jerry Koosman or Tommy Agee or Cleon Jones. It's about some of the lesser-known players who became well-known because they were on that team, like Al Weitz and Don Clendenin and Eddie Kranepool and Ron Swoboda, who made the great catch in Game 4, and Ed Charles and Buddy Harrelson. And I mean, I can go down the list with names. The reality is that because everybody on that team contributed, I think that's the beauty of it also. It wasn't that we just won. It was everybody was a part of it. That legacy of the team of that goes on forever. And who knows, I think it's one of these teams that that there'll be iconic memories of that team forever. And after all of us are gone and not around anymore, people still remember the '69 Mets for what we did for New York and the game of baseball. I always tell people we really kind of made the world a different place for a brief period of time, at a time when it was really a tumultuous, really tough time in this country.
It's a beautiful story, and yeah, I love that there was it wasn't all stars that were on the team, but got to be a part of this. That's huge. I love the brotherhood that way. I also, in such a fragmented media world now, and with so much going on, I think back on that time. I think that the two biggest things happening, other than the war, the biggest thing happening in the world was this. And it was a very unified time for people to focus and center around this. And that's huge. Well, you don't see that very often, if ever, anymore.
Well, it's interesting. My first book was called The Magnificent Seasons, which was about those three teams. And I used timeline events to show what was going on in certain situations when there was big games for the Jets or the Mets or the Knicks. And you know what? It's interesting, Derek. I couldn't find any good news other than the walk on the moon. And I guess Woodstock, if you want to call that, something good, which was ironically a very, very spiritual endeavor. Right. But the reality of it was that there was no good news, and it was a world that was, again, upside down. I know we have some problems now in the world, but back then, it was for those who lived through it, the war in Vietnam was just an incredible thing that was tearing this country apart. And I've had Vietnam veterans come up to me and say, "Thank you for making me feel better for 5 minutes in a place that was the worst place in the world in Vietnam." And so that part of it is so spiritual for me and wonderful when people say that. But it was just a very difficult time. And for those of you who weren't around at that time, it's hard to imagine what it was like. I mean, just as an example, when the Knicks won their championship, I believe it was May 8th in '70, 3 days before that happened, they had the shootings at Kent State, where our National Guard shot and killed 5 students and wounded 9. Our National Guard, because it was a protest on the campus, and it was just a horrible time. And so, again, it was just these teams, and in particular the Mets, because of where we came from, just made people feel better. So I'm so proud to have been part of that. And again, talking to somebody like yourself who even wasn't born but now understands and knows about that period of time is very, 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 very special for me.
Well, I came back from us meeting in person, and I told some of the groups I work with when we talked about doing an interview, I said I felt like I was sitting with a historian. And reading this book, and I appreciate that. No, I appreciate that. I really do, because I look for a story. That's what I do. I want to see stories. I want to understand it. And context is everything. And so for you talking about this time of the war and the Woodstock and first person or walking on the moon, those are huge things. Those are things I read about in history books, but I didn't get to see. I wasn't there. And so that's a big deal. And here, I want to talk for just a minute also, though. And first of all, I want to give a shout out to my father-in-law, Walter Lane, there on Long Island, because he was at that series. It's a defining moment in his life as a teenager, and he was one of those storming the field with many others after you won each game. So shout out to my father-in-law.
We had 3 celebrations back then. Remember, that was the first year of division play, so we won a division at Shea Stadium, and then we won the pennant against the terrific Atlanta Brave team, and then we won the World Series against Baltimore. Shea Stadium got torn up, and there was really no crowd control back then. And there's these pictures of these crowds rushing onto the field, and unbelievable. And the grounds crew, I got to give them a shout out. I don't know who's around anymore, but the grounds crew did a fantastic job just getting that field ready for things that were going on. And so it was just that kind of time. But again, what's really interesting, people needed something to make them feel better about their lives. It was either financial or health-wise or the war again, and people just grabbed on to something to make them feel better. We were a light at the end of the tunnel for these people, and I think that's what makes me feel so good about being part of that team, because it's just amazing that the amount of just thank you for the memories, thanks for this, thanks for that. It's just amazing that all of us who were part of the team hear that all the time. And I live in the New York area, so I hear it almost every day.
Well, I had wanted to ask you about that. That was one of my questions. Is you've been living in New York and you talk about in the book that you're transplant to New York, and at first you were trying to figure it out, and with the accents, and I get that. Then you lived there for 50 years following the event. You're a living legend there. You're on I think on Everybody Loves Raymond. One of the dog's name was Shamsky.
Yeah,
correct?
They named the dog after me. That's one example of that. That wouldn't have happened if I wouldn't have been on that championship team.
Right.
I mean, I hear that. I get that question more than baseball stuff. Do you know they named the dog after you on Everyone Loves Raymond? And I say to people, well, we did it back in 1999. So after all these years, I think I finally figured out that I was on that program and they named the dog after me. But it's again one of these things that happens to you. I mean, once we won, so many things happened to all of us. We were on so many shows and so many things. They took 7 of us to Las Vegas to sing at Caesar's Palace and make fools of ourselves on stage. But it was wonderful. I mean, just to be part of all this, and I think all that kind of stuff would not have happened if it wouldn't have been the Mets. The lovable losers who lost so many games in the mid-'60s, early '60s, and came out and won a World Series in 1969. None of that would have happened if it wasn't that kind of team that was known to be such a bad team, and then go ahead and win. And again, of course, what was going on in the country at the time.
It's such a great story. I want to transition for a minute and talk about the book I'm holding in my hand right now and they better make a movie. I'm sure you're working through those things, but this needs to be a movie. It needs to be, and it's not about baseball. It's about, you talked about aging, and I mean, to 50 years later, and I'm going to just read for just a second out of the book, just at the beginning, you call Hall of Famer, you call Tom Seaver, and you say, hey, I'm writing a book on our team, and I'd like to come out with some of the guys to see you in May. At this point, I'm going to try to get Buddy, Coons, and Rocky to come along. We'll sit around, laugh a little, reminisce, and tell the same old lies. The balls that we barely hit over the fence that are now 500-foot blasts. Yeah. Those kind of lies. Yeah. And then Seaver chuckled and said, but those are good lies. So imagine sitting to our audience, imagine being a fly on the wall to hear baseball legends recalling their memories, which is even cooler, large and small. How special would that be? And you actually get the chance to do that in this book. So super cool.
Yeah, what happened was that Tom had not been well for a while. He had Lyme disease for 20 years, and they misdiagnosed it for a couple of years. And what we wanted to do is I wanted to talk to him and interview him, but I didn't want to do it over the phone. It just wouldn't have had the same kind of context of not being to do it in person. And when I talked to him, and he said, "Sure, come on out," and I said, "I'm going to bring a couple guys," and told him who. And he said, "That would be great," but he said, I just talked to my wife because she makes up my schedule and stuff like that. And at that point, he wasn't doing any traveling, so it just made sense to go out there. So when I talked to his wife, Nancy, she said, he has good days and bad days. You guys are liable to get out here, and he might be having a bad time. And so we just rolled the dice. We got Buddy Harrelson, who had just announced that he was in early stages of Alzheimer's, and then they were roommates on the road playing together, both from California. It was important for him to go with us because I thought it'd be therapeutic for both Tom and Buddy to get together. And then we took Jerry Koosman, who was the second best pitcher and terrific guy and a funny guy, and Ron Swoboda, who made the great catch when Tom was pitching in right field in Game 4. And we just said, let's try and get out there, and hopefully Tom will feel okay. So Buddy and myself came from New York, and Eric Sherman, the co-writer, and we went out there, and Jerry Koosman had to come from Minneapolis and on a flight, and Ron Swoboda came from New Orleans, and so we had to coordinate it, and it was just a roll of the dice. And when we got out there, we still didn't know if he was going to feel okay. We spent the money. We said it's worth it. Let's see what happens. And we got there on a late Friday afternoon, and I called, and Nancy Seaver said, it's too late today. Let's try for tomorrow. But tomorrow being Saturday was the only day that we could really do this because we had to leave early Sunday to get the flights and work that stuff out. So as luck would have it, somebody was watching over us. I called on Saturday, and she said, you lucked out. He's feeling pretty good. We went over to his house up in Napa Valley, just a beautiful place. He's in the wine business, and just a beautiful, beautiful setting. And we got there, and it was just a wonderful 8 or 9 hours sitting around and talking. We went out into the vineyards and we walked around. He told us how he's in the wine business and that's what he wants to do the rest of his life. And then we went out to lunch in Calabasas, which is not Calabasas. I'm sorry. It's I forget the name of the town right there where he's living, and it's Northern California. And it's a beautiful place, and it was just this incredible day that we spent. And when we said goodbye, it was bittersweet because you just didn't know. We didn't know if we were going to see everybody together again, and we knew there was going to be a reunion this year, but we didn't think Tom was going to come back for it. And as it turned out, a couple months earlier this year, they announced that he wasn't going to be making any public appearances anymore. And so the trip there was really the basis for the whole book. It's not about Tom Seaver, the book, but it's about the camaraderie and the love and the aging process that we've all gone through and the guys that we lost. And we sat around and reminisced about those wonderful players who passed away, including our manager, Gil Hodges, but you guys like Tug McGraw and Tommy Agee and Don Clendenin and Cal Coons, Don Cardwell, the coaches, Yogi and Rube Walker and Eddie Yost. And it was just, it was bittersweet in the sense, but just wonderful to reminisce about all these guys that were so important to the success of that team. And that really became the basis of the book. And we started out the trip to put it together, and then went through the season. We didn't want to do a game-by-game thing, although we did talk about specific games, but then we finished off with coming home and how important that couple days was for us. But that was the beauty of it. It was just this wonderful experience of going out to see him.
Well done on that. Well done on the book and the way the story is told. It's great. You give some funny moments, but we basically get insight as you guys are reminiscing. We get in on that in the book, and you tell about small moments, a Doberman in the locker room, experiences with Yogi that are humorous, and just all kinds of great small moments, which are my favorite because those are what make the big moments.
What's interesting, Yogi was the perfect example. A lot of people didn't forget. Yogi's so associated with the Yankees.
Right.
But he won the World Series with us as a first base coach. And I like to tell the story that when I got over there, and I'm from St. Louis originally, and he was too, and we, I wanted to just get to know him because he was an idol of mine. And it was, it was just the funny stories about getting to know Yogi and everything. And he was technically our hitting coach. And I tell people, as great as Yogi was, he was our hitting coach, but never talked to us once about hitting. And he was just, he said, I said to him one time, I said, Yogi, I'm really struggling swinging the bat. He said, well, see it and hit it. That was it. That was our hitting instruction. So, but it was great to have him there because he was such a wonderful guy. And Yogi is going to go down in history as one of the most unbelievable characters who ever played baseball. And he's got 13 or 14 World Series rings. So this was just another one for him. But it was great to have him around, and very special person.
One of my favorite visuals in the book, and thank you for sharing that, was your group sitting at Denny's in Napa area, and the waitresses coming up and saying, "Are you guys famous?" And a couple of you wearing the Mets jerseys, and then someone was holding the '69 newspaper. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was. I think it was a magazine that Koosman was on the cover.
Wow.
And the waitress happened to be from upstate New York, so it kind of all fell into place. But once she heard the Mets and then '69, and she happened to be old enough to remember it, it was like we got all the free coffee we wanted, it was that kind of thing. See, there are perks of being on that team. You got the free coffee at Denny's, so it was just part of the experience. It was just great.
Man, Art, thank you for spending time with us. Final question with you. I'm curious for you. You have all these memories. Is there one in particular moment, or a small, large, that's your fondest or most proud memory that you have?
Well, being part of that team is always going to be special. But I mentioned earlier that I made the last out of the first game, and I didn't start the game because at that time Gil was platooning myself and Ron Swoboda in right field, but he did send me up to pinch hit in the ninth inning, and I was on the on-deck circle getting up there, and I just remembered that, I had about 30 seconds to think about this, and I thought about, this is interesting, Derek, this is a great question, because I thought about all the times as a little kid and my friends went to the park to practice and play baseball and make up games, and then all the high school games that I played, Little League, high school, American Legion, and all the minor league games that I played in to get to the big leagues. And I thought about all that to get to this moment in my life, which was every kid's dream, to be in the World Series. And I think that flashed on me, and I think about that all the time. And I also think about that at-bat that I grounded out to second and could have been a hero and just as easily hit the ball out of the ballpark. But that moment on the on-deck circle of every kid's dream to be in the World Series, and, of course, winning it, I think was very, very special for me. But there's so many moments in my career and so many moments that particular year that are so important that I'm able to talk about with wonderful people like yourself and express how important that was to be on that team and be a member of this historic team. And so I'm just very thankful. I've got everything to be thankful for being part of that team.
Well, Art, thank you again. Baseball legend Art Shamsky. Make sure that you get his book. It's a great book. Whether you're a sports fan or not, you need to read this. It is a great story. After the Miracle, the Lasting Brotherhood of the 69 Mets. And Art, thank you for wearing this well. And it couldn't happen to a better person. And I appreciate you taking time to reminisce and document for us, because I think it's important, and my generation and future generations are going to continue to talk about this story, and especially the way that you're helping share it.
All right, great. Thanks, Derek.
Thank you again, Art.
You've been listening to the Business Leadership Series, where we engage with leaders who are making an impact on their worlds and who want to share their knowledge and experience for your personal and professional growth. This interview was designed to inspire you to become the best leader you can be.